Thank you. And thank you, Jenny, for that introduction. As she mentioned, I am the chair of the lumping and splitting working group. I also am the product owner of the gene tracking system. And so we're going to give a few updates about the importance of this tracking system. As Jenny mentioned, this is really geared towards gene curation. As implicated by the name, but also for that pre-curation. So the general purpose of this system is to provide a centralized database to catalog all planned, in progress, and completed gene disease curations, as well as to record evidence supporting lumping and splitting decisions. So this really comes down to the disease entities that have been asserted and recording those that have been chosen and whether you have lumped or split those. Why this is important is because it avoids duplication of expert panel effort. We know that there are several genes that are associated with multiple disease entities, and they may be of interest to several expert panels. And so in order to avoid duplication of effort, this is just that centralized database that everyone can go look at those gene records, how they're being covered, and whether or not they've already been curated. This also allows promotion of discussion between expert panels interested in curating the same gene. And so you would be able to find the information of what they've already provided there, understand whether or not it's lumping and splitting, and also have the information to come and contact these individuals to talk about the information they've already collected. Luckily, we also have the ability now on the gene curation interface to give multiple contributors. And so this is part of the effort that really helped with promoting these different contributions made in collaboration between expert panels. It also tracks the curation effort and progress, not only over entire ClinGen GSEPs, but at an individual expert panel, as well as at the individual biocurator level if desired. This is extremely important when we think about just our expert panel progress and personal progress, but overall as a metric reporting mechanism. This is a little bit geared more towards coordinators rather than biocurators, but this is certainly a significant amount of our work is spent on trying to track how many curations have done, and so this is supposed to facilitate that. I just want to go over some important features of this tracking system. And so it does catalog the pre-curation evidence per the lumping and splitting criteria. So for those of you that are very familiar with gene curation, or even if you are newly associated with it, pre-curation is a process that we use to be able to define the most appropriate disease entity and assess a Mondo ID for a gene curation. We do this through a process of collecting data. And at this time, the gene tracking system is the only system that catalogs this information in a standardized way. It is not collected per se in the gene curation interface. That is mostly the curation evidence and how you got to the classification. This is vital and important work because we have collaborations with other nosological sites like OMIM, as well as ontological sites like Mondo. And so this work will help us to facilitate harmonization of our gene disease curations and records across multiple different sites. And also there are requirements for the optimal functionality of the gene tracking system to be able to collaborate with OMIM and Mondo. This would include changes into the current curation workflow you may be using, and we'll be reviewing that in a subsequent slides. Next, tracking of that curation progress. What's great about this system is it allows a bulk download of your gene curation data. This can include your gene list, disease entities, classification statuses, and dates. This can facilitate a quarterly milestone report. As we said, on the individual biocurator level, you can see how many curations you have performed over several GSEPs and be able to give an idea of your progress and what you've done. May be very useful for biocurators in the future when you want to think about giving information on how involved you've been in different groups as well. But for the expert panel, obviously, just being able to see how they're progressing through their data. The downloads for the entire expert panel or biocurator is dependent on the user's role. Biocurators at this point are restricted to download only their personal records. So if you do have access as a biocurator to this system, you would only get on a bulk download your genes you've curated or been assigned to, if that was denoted. For coordinators, however, they can download the full gene list for their expert panels, as well as the entire gene list over ClinGen. I do want to highlight some new features that have been recently released or pending release in the gene tracking system. We now have automated OMIM, HGNC, and Mondo nomenclature updates. So what this means is that the system will review these sites. It does this daily for changes to any type of nomenclature, whether it's a disease entity, the name of a gene, and or other phenotypic names. And it will automatically give these updates in the system as well as alert the user to changes by an email. And we'll see some examples of that later. But basically, if you were the assigned biocurator and or coordinator, it will let you know about these changes. This is really important for us to understand how these nomenclature are changing and maybe to potentially assess our curation efforts for future recuration. Also, it's going to, coming soon is going to be our release of the automated record updates from the GCI. We are very excited about this. So through the ClinGen streaming service, the gene tracker can now consume data from the GCI, which means the GCI is sending data that we are now uptaking. This will allow us to have automated updates in the gene tracking system for each gene record, which will include curation classifications, that classification status with the dates, mode of inheritance, as well as the biocurator performing this. Again, for this optimal functionality, there would be a change in workflow that we'll go through later. So I just wanted to show an example of that automated nomenclature alert. If you happen to be assigned to any one of the genes here, you can see an email or may have already received an email very much like this one in which you're being told of a change and being provided hyperlinks to be able to go look at that information. So this is the all-important slide for our curation workflow updates. So in order to assist this automated update between the GCI and Gene Tracker, we really want to express to you all and ask for all biocurators as well as coordinators to adopt this new workflow. So at a minimum, we would want you to go through and perform your pre-curation first before you begin a curation in the GCI. This is pretty typical of what we ask for our workflow. And most of you are doing this because we have to get a Mondo ID for the curation to be able to begin a record in the GCI. However, we want to ask that your next step after you perform this pre-curation is to really enter the required information into the gene tracker. This information is going to include the type of curation, whether or not you've lumped or split, and we'll review each one of these fields in a moment. The MIM numbers included in the curation. So this points to OMIM, the assertions that are cataloged within them at this time. And being able to choose which ones will be included, as well as your overall Mondo ID that was decided by your expert panel. This ID should be the one that is used when you create the gene disease mode of inheritance record in the GCI. I do want to give a very important note though for biocurators is please check with your GCEP coordinator on their preference for gene tracking use. This varies by GCEP and the use and the individuals allowed on the system is at the discretion of the GCEP coordinator. So we have some groups where coordinators only are using it, others where they've put biocurators on. So it's very important to check your group and how they want to do this. So that pre-curation in the gene tracking system, I want to show you the overall record and an example of a curation and what you can expect to find when you're in the gene tracking system. We are cataloging all of the relevant information for the gene, including its HGNC ID, which allows us the stable identifier to be able to give updates to any nomenclature changes in gene name. We also include that expert panel, which is really important so that we can associate what expert panel has performed curations for each of these genes and what phenotypes have been included. I do want to note that the gene tracker, you can have several different records for the same gene on here. There's no restriction as you do on the GCI, and that's really for us to be able to understand how these curations are being used. As I showed here, the curation type would be a specific required element just to let us know that curation and what type it is, but it will also catalog the phenotypes you've included in this specific record. This points to those OMIM phenotype numbers, which are going to be critical for us to be able to have our collaboration of and harmonization of records, which I'll show you in a minute. The other things that you can add to this, which would be really nice, but not necessarily required, are the rationale. This is the picking the different criteria for the lumping and splitting working group. You also have the ability to add PMIDs that support this and any extra notes that you have that you think would be useful for any other person to read. And lastly, that Mondo ID, which will point to what you've actually chosen for the curation record. So once you get into the system and you enter in a gene to make a new record, you will then be able to see the curation type. This is where we get into figuring out whether it's a lump or split. We will begin to show you the assertions that are made based on OMIM, and we will pull in that information for you to view. You can choose which one of the choices you are doing. This one happened to be a lump disease. And if you have any questions, we show you the lumping and splitting criteria, as well as a hyperlink to the criteria for to review in full if needed. After you've done this, you will next move on to the phenotype tab, which you can also choose on your own. What you'll notice is that you have radio buttons here now to be able to choose what entities are included within this system. This is how we're going to be able to have that harmonization here. You also could pick that rationale as we reviewed, and you can select multiple ones as well as PMIDs and rationale. Again, giving you some inference to the lumping and splitting criteria and the hyperlink to the overview if needed. Finally, on this fourth tab, we are going to have the Mondo ID. You can just enter the ID as it is printed on the Mondo website. We do give you the hyperlink out to the ontology lookup service, which is what we use for Mondo through EBI-IMBL. We also have the ability for you, if you are waiting for a Mondo ID, to be able to write out the disease entity. This may be important if you all are choosing as a GSEP to create a new disease nomenclature or ontology ID. You can have somewhat of a placeholder as you wait for that ID to be developed. I also want to point out that as you go into the GCI to create your gene disease record, there will be an alert or a flag for you as a biocurator, just to ask if you can check before proceeding that all relevant pre-curation information has been cataloged in the gene tracking system. At this time, we do not have a restriction from you entering the gene disease record before it's known to be within the gene tracking system. However, we may have some different updates. And again, it will help facilitate that automatic updates of status in biocurators if we have that pre-curation information in first. And just to bring you all back to that lumping and splitting guidance and pre-curation and really how we are using this to be able to define the appropriate disease entity, you all are welcome to go to the lumping and splitting website, which is on the ClinGen website under expert panels, or working groups, and you can go and find not only the guidelines, but pre-curation information, as well as examples and the video tutorial. So I want to give you a little bit of a view of why this is important for us to capture this pre-curation information, as we do plan to display this not only on the ClinGen website for the phenotypes that are associated with our lump disease entities in the future, but by displaying it on the ClinGen website, we will be able to help with these collaborations. What you're looking at is a screenshot from OMIM's webpage for the gene PLN or phospholambin. And currently, anytime there is a curation that has been published on the ClinGen website, the only way to be able to see this information on OMIM is going to the Clinical Resources tab, where you'll see the ClinGen validity. It no longer has the ability to be able to be front and center on this page because we do not have harmonization of the disease entities that are chosen. As we mentioned, though, we can see these same records are pulled up with our specific record in the gene tracking system and the fact that we have indicated it's lumped and we've included these entities. So as we think of a future measure, we can begin to think that OMIM may have something visualized similar to what you're seeing here, in which case we can now begin to show that these were the same entities included in a ClinGen gene validity classification and provide a direct link on their webpage. And so again, we encourage everyone to please be able to help us facilitate this collaboration, because this will be a far-reaching effort and allow ClinGen to be opened up to many more individuals. And so now I'm just going to go through a live demonstration to show you the actual system. And for anybody who has interest, this is the actual link to get there. But again, I would ask you to go talk with your coordinators on it. Before I do the live demonstration, does anyone have any questions about the updated workflow? Okay, great.
Courtney, there is a question in the chat box actually before we move on. This is from Erica. Will OMIM be able to display ClinGen curations if we curate using Mondo terms?
Yes, and that's a great question. And the reason why we do use the Mondo terms for our gene disease records, but as we indicated, this system is the only one that is now pulling in not only the Mondo ID, where we can harmonize with Mondo, but the OMIM phenotypes. And so what we plan to do in the future is be able to display, just as I showed on the website, that for each curation, these were the OMIM phenotypes that were included, as well as the Mondo ID that was chosen in the end. So this will help even Mondo harmonize if these entities aren't currently underneath a similar broader phenotype of an ontology, that they would now reorganize that too. Great question. So this is the actual system. What you're looking at here is the dashboard area. In the dashboard, typically, if you are a biocurator, all you will see on your dashboard are just your gene records that you have been assigned to as a curator. You would not see the full record. For coordinators, you would see every record on all of the expert panels that you coordinate. So if it's just one, it will be restricted to one. If you have multiple, you will see that full list. This is the area as a coordinator and or a biocurator that has the ability to edit all curations, that you can add a new curation. You can do this individually one at a time, but we also have the ability to do a bulk upload of an entire gene list. So for those coordinators that are for new GSEPs, we do have that ability, and I'll show you where you can do that later. This is exactly what we had gone through at the time if you were to create a new gene disease record, and you can just enter in the HDNC gene symbol. It will check back with HDNC whether or not it is a correct symbol, and you would get an error if it wasn't. The nice thing is it also gives you an alert to tell you what other expert panels have already had interest in this, and what is the status of their curation at the time. So it will give you the link to be able to look at those individual records and decide whether or not you still want to keep this on your gene list and collaborate with other groups, or there's a separate split curation, or whether or not you think that you do not need to do any more curation. We have the ability to add many other levels of information, but at the very least, you would want to add the gene alone. We do have some for trusted users as myself to add advanced info for the GCIU UID. This allows us with that automated approach. So if we go back into the dashboard, you can also use this search bar to look at any gene of interest that you may have curated in your dashboard, and view those different links. So you should be able to look by expert panel, a gene symbol, and so on, even by curator. Under the Curations tab, this is where you will potentially be able to see a few more genes of interest and look through. This is also the area that if you are a biocurator, you can say download a CSV. You can pull this export, and it will show you all of the genes that you have either been assigned to or have already done a curation for in one standard list. That is an Excel CSV file. You also have the ability as a coordinator just to pick any of your individual GSEPs, or download a complete list of all genes. You can restrict this by a start and end date, which helps with quarterly reports, but obviously as the whole list, you can see here, you could sort based on each one of these different data points that we're collecting and displaying. What's also nice is that if you all have curiosity going to the working groups tab, you will have the ability to look at all of the clinical domain working groups we have and the expert panels that are underneath them or associated with them. So for instance, if I go to neurodevelopmental disorders, it will begin to load and show you all of the expert panels that are with this CDWG. What's nice is this gives you the ability as it comes through to show you not only those expert panels, but the individuals that are associated with that panel at the time, as well as the curation specifically for that group and those different genes. Now, if you as a user come through this, you can not only look at that curation export, which I had talked to you about, but if you happen to be a coordinator, you could use your drop-down menu to do the bulk upload. Again, at minimum, you would need to have a file. You can download the template here. You need at least the HGNC gene symbol, as well as choosing the expert panel here. And then you would upload. This checks back every symbol through HGNC to make sure it's correct. If there are any errors, it would be noted here for you, and you would have to go back and just clean up those different gene symbols and make sure that they're up to date. You also have the ability to get the SOP and the link for it into in this system. So that's there for you if you have any other questions on the utility and your access or restrictions. Great. And I'm not sure if anyone else has any questions, but that is a general overview of this system and how it works. So I do want to let you know about some future feature considerations that we have. One of them would be automated recuration alerts. So gene recuration is set based on a time frame and is dependent on either the classification at the last publication date or the publication date of a specific record. We can see that information is listed here, and the procedure can be found on the ClinGen website. Why this becomes useful is when we look at classifications such as moderate and limited, they are 2 years from the last approval date. And so because we are bringing that information in automatically through the GCI, we could potentially have the ability to send out those automatic recuration alerts to coordinators and or biocurators. For the strong, it does require 3 years from the original discovery publication date, and we are working with the GCI and other software platforms to be able to facilitate this work. I also wanted to let you know about some helpful resources. The Gene Tracker SOP, as I said, can be accessed in the system, or you can contact us at clingentrackerhelp@unc.edu. So any questions on use of the Gene Tracker should be directed here. We also have a GitHub repository. So for those of you that are used to GitHub and creating issues, the link is provided here. This allows us to track any issues such as bugs, errors, and feature enhancements, but also use this if you have received an error while using the system. If you're not familiar with this, please also send it back to the Tracker Help, and we will try to get help for you as soon as we can. And lastly, I just wanted to provide some acknowledgements. I want to acknowledge TJ Ward, who was the lead developer on this system. He was working at UNC Sheps at this time, but is now our lead developer in ClinGen, and we are very happy to have him here. We also have Jenny Goldstein, who is the chair of the BioCurator call here, but she was the stakeholder proxy and helped with workflow design as we went through this, and Maria Tobin, who is an application analyst. I'd also like to thank Matt Wright, Gloria Chung, and Tristan Nelson for their help with automation of the gene record status. It was very nice and significant work for them to bring back to us to help with getting this new feature. Do we have any questions?
That was great. Thank you, Courtney. Any questions? Please feel free to put them in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask.
Hi, Courtney, this is Shruti. Thank you for this presentation and for the update on the curation workflow. So my question for the pre-curation part is, if there's a gene associated with a single disease entity, we are still updating the gene tracking system with respect to the classification or the status of curation. But for the pre-curation information, would we still have to update anything there?
That's a really great question. So that is where we would want to, even if it's a single gene disease entity, it will actually mark that for you. So you would basically say the single gene and it will capture that OMIM ID. So that would still be useful because we need to display that MIM phenotype number with the Mondo ID that we're using for the N classification. So hopefully it won't be too, too much work to enter that in. But thank you, that was a really great question.
Okay, so with respect to the pre-curation part, we don't have to like select anything, like the options for these entities were lumped, a single entity was chosen. So do we have to update that?
Yes, we would still say you want to update that. You'd want to indicate that you are just picking one of the assertions off the list, surely. And then you would just pick the one association that's there. Obviously, we do have some genes that are not associated with a phenotype per OMIM, and that would still be critical for those types of genes because you would now say you are picking a gene-disease relationship that is not listed, and we'd be providing a Mondo. So that, in a way, would be able to kind of target to OMIM that there are some new assertions being based off of ClinGen guidance and work.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay, so Christy asked, can we change the coordinator who is responsible for a curation? Yes, if you need to change the coordinator, please email myself or that ClinGen tracker email, and we can always change that information for you. And that's the true of anyone that you want for biocurators. We do have the ability to also deactivate individuals. So if you once had a biocurator on an expert panel that was using this, that is no longer part of the panel, but clearly had performed some curations that were important, we can deactivate them so they no longer have access to the system, but their name would remain in your group as a choice to choose as a biocurator. So that information remains there.
Courtney, I don't know if you want to mention the bulk upload feature. We found that pretty helpful in our group because we did a ton of hearing loss genes before the tracker existed. I mean, maybe most people have already used it already, but just in case.
Yeah, this is a really great feature again. So for that bulk upload, you would come here and download your template. What this does is it provides an Excel or a CSV download. You would go to the first tab, curations. What's nice is that you can just copy all the HGNC gene symbols here, but we do provide several other places you can add information. But at minimum, you would want to put in this symbol. Save that file with all of your gene symbols, and then you would come back and add this information in with your expert panel. So you choose your specific expert panel, upload that file, and you will bulk upload. This was definitely significant for the hearing loss who had over 100 genes and ID autism that had 750. So whether you have just 10 or you have a larger number, this certainly puts them all up as a record at once.